Well, performing rights has certainly been a hot topic recently, with more and more groups unsure about what permissions their licence gives them. Time to put your questions to the man in the know.
Yes, I'm Paul Taylor. I'm the Performing Rights Director here at Samuel French, and I deal with all the contracts and the licensing of plays to amateur and professional groups.
We have purchased the licence to perform a play and would like to film a performance. Are we allowed? Asks Sue in Leeds.
This is a very complicated issue, and groups should always be aware that the licence that they obtain, whether it's from ourselves or whether it's from Joseph Weinberger or Nick Hearn, it's for a stage performance that their group's doing. And anything else that they want to do, whether it's recording it onto a CD or onto a DVD, or whether that's just for the company's archive, or whether it's manufacturing multiple copies for sale, all of that needs to be investigated very carefully in advance. There's no general ruling about it, and it isn't automatically necessarily the case that they'll be able to do that. It depends upon the circumstances relating to any particular musical or play. And sometimes it might be a matter of having to refer to an American film company, so the answer isn't going to be obtainable overnight. And the situation does vary from one play to another. We publish a lot of pantomimes in which we have those rights. So if somebody gets on to us and says we want to make a recording of our pantomime for either to keep a copy for our records or to sell copies, then we can usually give them that permission. And there are fees payable according to what you're going to do with it. But if they wanted to do the same thing with a play by Tom Stoppard or Harold Pinter or a Broadway musical, we couldn't do that. We would have to refer them elsewhere, and it's quite feasible that they wouldn't be able to do it. But the important thing, as in all rights matters, is to give yourself plenty of time, not to leave it until the last minute and then say, oh yes, that's a good idea, let's record our performance the night after tomorrow, because you won't be able to get permission in that time.
Pamela in Swansea has asked if her group are allowed to upload a video they filmed of their last production to the group's website and YouTube.
Yes, I mean that's even more complicated, because normally when rights to make a video are available, the amount that we would charge would be dependent upon the number of people who are going to see it. In the same way as the amount you pay for a stage production depends upon how many performances you're giving and how big your theatre is. I mean, that determines what the royalty will be. But when you put something online, then it can potentially be seen by everybody all over the world who's online. So it's really difficult to quantify what would be an appropriate royalty. And that's even assuming those rights are available, which they may well not be if MGM have got the rights. So no, that is a very complicated issue and not something which one can assume is necessarily going to be able to be done.
Aaron in Hemlington says, I've heard that it's illegal to photocopy scripts. What are the rules?
Yes, I mean, photocopying isn't allowed. And really, if you think about it, photocopying is really a form of stealing, because you're obtaining multiple copies of a script without paying for it. The only circumstances in which photocopying is to a degree allowed is in educational circumstances. Schools can photocopy a percentage of a particular text if they have a licence from the Copyright Licensing Agency, but it's only 4% of the actual text. They can't photocopy entire books. And outside of a school environment, no, you have to actually buy the books that you're using for a play.
When someone purchases rights to perform a musical, what is supplied? Are backing tracks made available, and if not, can we make our own? Asks Bernie in Gateshead.
What we normally supply for our musicals is a vocal score, piano conductor score, and band parts or orchestral parts according to how large the orchestration is. Sometimes we're able to provide backing tracks if we're provided with those tracks by the owners of the rights. And that is becoming increasingly the case, but it isn't always the case. But that is the sort of musical material that we normally provide. If people want to make backing tracks for the purposes of their production and they aren't available, they need to ask us, because again, this is something which needs to be investigated and looked into.
Derek in Barnstable wants to know, what is Section 34? He keeps hearing it mentioned with regards to performance rights and licence issues.
People may have come across Section 34 of the 1988 Copyright Act, which relates to performances in schools. And you have to determine what is going to be a public production and what is going to be a school private production. Basically, what it means is that anything which takes place in school, presented by pupils or teachers and watched by an audience of other pupils and teachers, is educational. As soon as you allow people from outside the school into the audience, including parents and friends, it becomes a public performance, just as much as any amateur drama group doing a play. It doesn't matter whether you're charging them admission or not. The fact that there are people in the audience who are not actually members of the school makes it a public performance.
Why are some plays and musicals withdrawn or restricted, asks Lisa in Harrow.
One of the main problems that we find that amateur groups experience is when plays are withdrawn for performance by amateurs or restricted, that's to say they can't be performed in certain parts of the country. And the golden rule is always to check that a play is available, or a musical is available for performance before you commit yourself to it. So when you have your committee meeting and you say, yes, this will be a good idea, we'd like to do that, the first thing to do is check that it's not, for some reason, withdrawn. It's not going to be put on in the West End. It's not about to go out on a national tour, which might mean it can't be done in your town. Check in advance that it can be done and get your licence. Because once you've obtained your licence, you can go ahead regardless of what happens subsequently. Even if there is a revival of the play and it's withdrawn for amateur performance, you can still do it, because that's a legal document, your licence. And the fact that a play is published is no guarantee that it's necessarily available. I mean, The Mousetrap has been published, we published it 60 years ago, and it's still not available for amateur performance. So that's no guarantee.
And finally, Dot in Bishopsgarth writes, with regards to applying for the rights or licence to perform a play, where does one start?
People contact us either by telephone or by email, or they indeed write to us, but that happens less and less frequently nowadays. And they say they want to do a particular play, is it available for performance? And we will then send them what we call a quotation, or a licence application form, if you will, which gives details of where and when they're performing it, seating capacity of their theatre, and tells them what it's going to cost. And we will then process the licence. The form should be returned to us within 4 weeks, at least 4 weeks before the production, just so that there's plenty of time for the licence to be issued in time for the performance dates, because ideally you should have the licence at your place of performance to exhibit should anybody ask to see it. And if necessary, we can rush licences through, but 4 weeks is the general period that we like to be given in order to ensure that we can get the licence to you in time.